Hey, this is Derek, and you're listening to Skepticality, the official audio program of Skeptic Magazine, for Tuesday, November 27th, 2012. Skepticality. Welcome back to another episode of Skepticality, the show that brings you news, information, and interviews from writers, thinkers, and skeptics from all walks of life for the promotion and advancement of science. We hope that all of you who live here in the United States had a good Thanksgiving holiday, and for those of you who do not gorge yourself on too much food at the end of each November, I hope you're doing well as well. Last episode, Tim Farley let us know that he has to take some personal time to get things settled on his home front. We really hope he restarts his short segments for us sometime soon. However, just when you think this means Skepticality will start to become a little shorter by one segment, surprise. We have lost one segment this week, and two have popped up in its place. So, later on, you get to hear a new segment, which is created by Heather Henderson and produced by Emery, which you might know from their popular podcast, Skeptically Yours and Ardent Atheist. Heather is also the lead singer for the Penn Jillette No God Band. If you've ever gone to the Amazing Meeting, you might have seen or heard her at one of Penn's famous parties, which feature bucket loads of bacon and lots of donuts. Before that, we have another new segment. The Word of Skeptical Thought is often focused on science and looking critically at paranormal claims. One of the often lost categories tends to be the humanities. A couple of folks who focus their time on the humanities, Bob Blakowitz and Eve Siebert. Eve Siebert's degree is in Old and Middle English literature, Old Norse and Shakespeare. She wrote her dissertation on body and soul poems in Old and Middle English. Bob Blakowitz did his dissertation on World War II combat veterans' writings, both fiction and nonfiction. He tested in 20th century American literature, rhetoric, and composition. They teach at the Department of English at the University of Wisconsin, Eau Claire. Here is our new segment, which will give us a new look into the humanities.
Skepticism is often equated with science. TAM, the Amazing Meeting, is billed as a celebration of science, skepticism, and critical thinking. The Skeptic Society, which publishes Skeptic Magazine, calls itself a scientific and educational organization. And the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, which publishes Skeptical Inquirer, explains that its mission is to promote scientific inquiry, critical investigation, and the use of reason in examining extraordinary claims. In all three of these premier venues for skepticism and critical thought, an entire subject area relevant to skepticism goes largely ignored and undervalued, the humanities. By focusing on the intersection of the humanities and skepticism, as we hope to do in this feature, we in no way mean to diminish the importance of science and the scientific method to skepticism and critical thinking. We just happen to look at many of the same issues from a slightly different point of view.
As writing instructors, we try to teach college students to compose logical, well-reasoned arguments based on strong evidence. We teach them to examine and evaluate evidence across the disciplines. To a large extent, writing-intensive classes in the humanities are students' formal introduction to critical thinking. In our work as literary researchers and writers, we ask questions and try to find answers by examining texts and the literary and historical context of those texts. We look at and evaluate evidence. If the evidence contradicts our ideas, we modify them or reject them and look for new answers that are in keeping with the evidence.
As far as the humanities' connection to skepticism, there are, of course, some field-specific fringe beliefs. In Renaissance studies, for instance, pseudo-scholars spin elaborate theories to argue that someone, anyone, other than a middle-class actor from Stratford-upon-Avon was responsible for the works attributed to William Shakespeare, though none of these theories is supported by the literary and historical evidence.
Holocaust deniers mangle history for ideological ends. However, if you want to understand the history of anti-Semitism and the social conditions that contributed to the Holocaust, you need to talk to cultural historians. If you're going to gauge the plausibility of any survivor's testimony and understand what it means, you need to evaluate how it relates to the vast amount of historical information that has led to the modern consensus about the scale and prosecution of the Holocaust. Often, proponents of fringe theories stomp carelessly across multiple fields of specialty. Take the purported history book Holy Blood, Holy Grail, upon which the plot of the Da Vinci Code is based. It's an insult to scholars in the fields of history, literary studies, art history, theology, and biblical scholarship, all fields in the humanities. And yet, for many people, the Da Vinci Code is as close to Renaissance scholarship as they're likely to encounter in everyday life.
Ancient alien enthusiasts not only get engineering, physics, anthropology, and archaeology wrong, they also misinterpret literature, art, mythology, folklore, and history. There's no field of study that young Earth creationists can't bungle. Sure, their science is bad, but you should see what they do to Beowulf, and any work of literature or art that happens to have a dragon in it. Promoters of aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, and other cryptids often bolster their arguments by claiming a long history of sightings, but they often ignore the historical or literary context of those alleged sightings. There's a difference between a metaphor and an alien. They hardly ever look at a primary source, and when they do, they often mistranslate or misinterpret the text. Sometimes it's useful to have someone trained in a relevant field look at the context for these claims and show where they are flawed.
Far more often than not, the more ambitious the pseudo-scholar's claim, the more likely he is to display incompetence in several disciplines. The humanities touch on many fields of human knowledge, and it will be impossible for us to be experts in all the fields that this feature will discuss. However, we hope to impress on our listeners the importance of the humanities to the project of promoting critical thinking and a rationalistic worldview, goals that we share with all other skeptics.
Did you know that you can now subscribe to Skeptic Magazine digitally? Just grab our free Skeptic Magazine app, currently compatible with iOS, Android, PC, Mac, Kindle Fire HD, and BlackBerry Playbook. Head over to skeptic.com/magazine/app to find out more and download more of your favorite skeptic content.
I'm Heather Henderson, and this is the News and Religion. Pope Benedict XVI responded to criticism that the Club of Churchmen who will choose his successor is too Eurocentric, elevating 6 new cardinals from Colombia, India, Lebanon, Nigeria, the Philippines, and the U.S. during a formal ceremony Saturday. Cardinals serve as the Pope's closest advisors, but their main task is to elect a new Pope. And with Benedict, 85 and slowing down, that task is ever more present. Saturday's consistory marks the first time in decades that not a single European or Italian has been made a cardinal, a statistic that hasn't gone unnoticed in Italy. Oh my. On Thanksgiving, American Jews and Muslims in Washington volunteered together despite Middle East violence, according to the Huffington Post. The Franklin Park event was one of more than 17 Jewish-Muslim twinning volunteer projects across the nation in the days surrounding Thanksgiving, fostered by the New York-based Foundation for Ethnic Understanding. That's so nice. Former Jacksonville megachurch pastor Daryl Gilliard is back in the pulpit less than 2 months after his release from prison for committing sex crimes against minors. According to Jacksonville.com, Gilliard said he initially intended to decline the offer because he didn't want to subject the church to negative press or go through it again himself. He acquiesced when the church agreed to bar minors from the services and accepted his refusal to perform any kind of marriage counseling or other pastoral work. In 2004, Gilliard admitted to fathering the child of a woman who had accused him of raping her during a counseling session, according to court records. Gilliard's detractors have said he shouldn't be the pastor of any church or in any kind of ministry leadership. Lay and clergy alike have argued his sexual indiscretions with minors and adults biblically disqualify him from spiritual leadership. Well, I'll say, duh. I'm Heather Henderson, and this was the News and Religion. Visit my other podcasts at ardentatheist.com and skepticallyyours.net. Special thanks to my audio engineer, Emery. The News and Religion was brought to you through the scientific method.
This is Bob Carroll. Welcome to another episode of Unnatural Virtue. Today's topic is Intuition Revisited. In the first episode of Unnatural Virtue, I noted that we rely on intuition and unconscious brain processes to get us through the day. Most of the time, our natural way of thinking and perceiving works well enough. But there are many times where we need to temper and control our natural way of thinking in favor of reflection and critical thinking. I noted that the critical thinker doesn't ignore hunches and intuitions because they're often the result of unconscious processes based on knowledge, experience, practice, training, and facts. Today I'll expand on that notion and talk about those times when it is wise to suspend critical thinking in favor of intuition, and when it is wise to limit gathering data to a few items rather than an exhaustive list of the pros and cons. One of the oldest and most successful dirty tricks in competitive sports is to get your opponent to think about what he or she is doing. The last thing a baseball batter should be doing when he is about to be thrown a 90-mile-per-hour ball from 60 feet away is thinking about whether he's got his wrist cocked or his weight distributed for maximum power. A golfer who's running through a mental list of do's and don'ts while trying to hit a little white ball off a tee is a golfer in trouble. Likewise, an opera singer can't be thinking about the difficulty of the next string of notes, nor can an ice skater be thinking about making sure her left leg is just so when she tries the next complicated maneuver. There are times when thinking gets in the way of performance. Performers and athletes aren't the only ones who benefit from turning off the conscious mind from time to time. Many scientists have written about how they could not come up with a solution to a problem until they just let it go and stopped thinking about it. The answer came to them later, as if out of nowhere. Not thinking any longer helped solve the problem. If one has vast knowledge in a field like physics or chemistry, or one has accomplished a high level of performance in sports or the arts, intuition is neither guesswork nor irrational. Herbert Simon, Nobel Prize winner in economics, put it this way: for the true expert, intuition is nothing more than recognition. Also, when one has exhausted all sources and cannot decide which side has the stronger evidence, if you must make a decision, the best option may be to follow your gut. It is true that critical thinking generally requires that one consider all the relevant evidence before making a judgment. Sometimes, however, it is wise to stop gathering more evidence and restrict yourself to just a few key points before making a decision. Information overload can hinder our ability to make good judgments. The more variables you bring into play, the greater your chance of giving more weight to minor items and less weight to important items. Gathering more and more information can give one the illusion of understanding. This problem was poignantly illustrated by American psychologist and philosopher Paul Mill, who compared the predictions of trained counselors to a simple algorithm that used just 2 or 3 variables. Mill found that the simple programs were significantly more accurate in their predictions than the experts. A typical test might involve trying to predict the grade point average for various freshmen at the end of the school year. A simple formula looked only at high school GPA and the results of one standardized college entrance test were compared with the predictions of counselors who had interviewed each of the students for 45 minutes, had access to the results of several standardized tests, as well as a 4-page personal statement from each of the students. The algorithm outperformed 79% of the experts. American economist Orley Ashenfelter did a similar experiment involving predicting prices for fine Bordeaux wines. He pitted the experts against a simple formula that considered only weather, average temperature over the summer growing season, the amount of rain at harvest time, and the total rainfall during the previous winter. Ashenfelter's formula outperformed the world-renowned experts. Another area where gathering too much information is a hindrance is in matters of personal taste. Here, the less information, the better. Just drink the wine, taste the jam. Let your feelings tell you which print you prefer for your bedroom wall. Don't be influenced by how much the wine costs. Don't get hung up on the various qualities one might list to distinguish different jams. Don't get too many details about the various prints you have to choose from. If the one you like is affordable to you, buy it, no matter what your friends or the critics say. Finally, in decisions that are more or less trivial in the big picture, the This would include everything from buying a new pen to deciding where to go on vacation or what new couch to buy. Less information is often more information than you need. We've all heard the expression paralysis by analysis. When a decision is a minor one, the wisest path is often to focus on 2 or 3 important points, rather than drum up a list of every pro and con you can think of, and then apply your list to dozens of possible choices. With important decisions, like deciding whether to send men and women into combat in a foreign country, those should be made after consulting all the relevant experts and advisors and should never be made just by consulting one's gut feelings. Well, that's it for this episode of Unnatural Virtue. To find out more about the topics mentioned here, see my website, The Skeptic's Dictionary, and my blog, Unnatural Acts That Can Improve Your Thinking. In the meantime, please commit some unnatural acts in public. And don't forget, skepticism, though unnatural, is a virtue.
Hello and welcome to The Odds Must Be Crazy on Skepticality, where we ramble on for a few minutes about crazy coincidences while you enjoy your commute, workout, food preparation, or efforts to fall asleep. Hey, we just record it. We can't dictate how you use it.
I'm Wendy Hughes.
And I'm Jarrett Kaufman.
And we're here to tell you stories that will entertain you so much you will forget to eat. Well, actually, this one might do the opposite.
I can smell it all now. This story about online pizza ordering was contributed by blog reader Matthew McGrath. You can find it on our site starting today by searching for The Thin Crust Coincidence, or by clicking on the link in the show notes. Matthew writes, "Earlier this evening I had a powerful craving for some pizza. It was 8 p.m. and rainy on a Thursday evening, so I thought I'd order a pizza from a restaurant down the street. After ordering using their fancy website, I got a call several minutes later from a rather confused employee of the restaurant. She asked me why I decided to place 2 separate orders, one delivery and one pickup. I replied that no, in fact I just ordered the one pizza to be delivered and nothing else. Thinking it was a computer error, she confirmed both orders and realized that the following had occurred. 2 separate, unrelated people named Matthew McGrath decided to order a pizza. Both chose the same restaurant and both chose not to call but to use the online order system. Both submitted their orders at exactly the same time, and both live within a 5-mile radius of the restaurant in question. Weird."
So 2 people with the same name ordered pizza online at the same time from the same pizza parlor.
That's it in a nutshell, or whatever the appropriate pizza-related cliche would be. Anyway, Barbara Drescher, our friendly statistician and cognitive psychologist, pointed out that a lot of factors go into estimating the odds of a coincidence like this. Take it away, Wendy.
Here's Barbara's analysis. As usual, this story falls into the category of difficult to calculate due to a lack of information. But again, it brings up interesting human behavior. The fact that someone with his name lives within a 5-mile radius is not very surprising. When I was a child, we lived in an area with a fairly low population density. There were 2 people within that distance with my father's name. One even shared his middle name and was retired from the U.S. Navy. My dad was active duty at the time.
Sure, I get that especially with some names, there's more people who share them than we might think. But what about the timing of the order? That seems pretty strange.
Well, according to Barbara, the odds of ordering pizza at the same time requires more information. What we would need in order to estimate, even generally, the odds of this include the location, population, and the number of pizza places available in the area that deliver, the birth year, which we would need in order to determine how common the author's name is, the proportion of pizza orders which were made online at that time, how often the author orders pizza, some information about pizza delivery trends. Do more people order pizza when it's raining? What are the peak ordering times? The more orders a place receives, the more likely this is to happen.
So a lot of unknowns. Maybe we need to follow up with the submitter and do an in-depth investigation.
That sounds exciting to me. Barbara had more to say, though. What I find interesting is how many same-name stories we encounter. Surely there are interesting coincidences every day, but people are more likely to notice events that involve something as personal as their own name. Most of us have lived with our first names our entire lives. We write it, say it, and hear it more often than any other name in the universe. So even though our names are not unique to us, they sometimes feel as if they are, and they are extremely personal.
Wendy, you have a common name, don't you?
Yes, I do, Jarrett Lennon Kaufman. There are a lot of people named Wendy Hughes on Facebook.
Okay, good. Hopefully that explains the search hits we've been getting for nude photos of Wendy Hughes.
Nope, those were for me, but I haven't leaked those to the press yet.
Thanks for listening to The Odds Must Be Crazy. Please be sure to stop by our website and participate in the active discussion at the bottom of each story. Or if there is no active discussion, activate one yourself. You can even pretend to be more than one person and create a fascinating conversation with yourself, and no one will be the wiser. Except us, since we'll have the IP records.
Also, be sure to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, circle us on Google+, and validate us in life. Hit the Submit a Story link on our site to share your own crazy stories, or tweet the short ones with the hashtag TOMBC.
The Odds Must Be Crazy is a project in collaboration with the Independent Investigations Group in Los Angeles, California. Visit them at iigwest.org. Barbara Drescher is a contributing editor to our blog and can also be found at icbseverywhere.com.
Special thanks to our stand-in producer and audio engineer, Emery. Our theme music comes to us courtesy of Mr. Deity himself, Brian Keith Dalton. You can find him at mrdeity.com.
So what do you think people should take away from this episode, Wendy?
I have no idea what they should take away, Jarrett. I'm too focused on takeout. Let's order pizza. Olives and anchovies, my treat.
And there goes my appetite.
Thank you to all of our contributors, and we welcome Bob, Eve, and Heather to our normal segment lineup. I sincerely hope that they continue to take the time to share their thoughts with all of us here on the show. This time around, my guest is someone who should not need much of an introduction. It is Penn Jillette. Penn is a well-known magician, writer, and skeptic. He is the taller, louder half of the Penn and Teller act, which was seen weekly on Showtime via their highly skeptical and long-running television show, Bullshit. You can also go to Las Vegas and see their great stage act at the Rio All-Suite Hotel Casino. I was honored to grab some time with Penn to discuss his journey into stage magic and his relationship with skeptical thought and his latest book. So, I'm here today with Penn Jillette. And Penn, is that your real name?
Yes, it is. My parents planned on having a girl named Penny, and I guess no one told them there were two possibilities, so they made the name slightly more masculine in their minds by cutting off the Y and making it Penn. I don't really know all their motives, but that's the story I heard, so there you go.
Well, I've never heard that part of the story, so that makes more sense now. So you mentioned your mom. Now, it would be fair to say you had a really close relationship with your mom?
Well, with both my parents, yeah. With both my mom, my dad, and my sister. I was very, very, very close. But my mom, even as close as I was to my dad, I might have been a little closer to my mom.
Is that hence why you still wear the red fingernail?
Yeah. I wear my dad's pinky ring, and I wear my mom's nail polish, and pretty much always have. I mean, I started the red fingernail polish in high school to mock my mother. She said, since you're doing all this magic and juggling with your hands, you should keep your nails nice. And I said, oh, you mean like this? And put her nail polish on. And she was like, oh, Penn. And I was mocking her. And from mocking her, it went to a little signal that I would use when I was on TV. I would just, flick that ring finger with the nail polish on it. It was my way of saying hi to my mom. And then when my mom died the first day of 2000, New Year's Day 2000, it became, I want to say a remembrance, except I don't need that to remember her. I just like doing it now. I'm going to try to maybe change it now and tell my daughter it's for her, because I think it kind of always was. It was just a different generation coming along.
Oh, yeah. But it's just, one of those things that similar, my grandfather, he passed away, and one of the things he willed to me was his pinky ring, so I wear it now and then, especially to special occasions, even though, like you, I just do it because I don't need to remember him, but, it's just one of those things.
Yeah, there's a thing in A Beautiful Mind, that movie, where John says they're talking about him holding some memento, and they say, but you don't believe in any of that having a value. He says, but I do believe in ascribing meanings to certain things. And I think you can do that, as an atheist and as a skeptic, you can know that the object has no meaning, but also know that you can place meaning upon it. And that's a great feeling for me. And I am rather sentimental at times.
Yeah, and I get that same way. So you might be the second person we've had on our show that attended the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Clown College.
Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey, greatest show on earth. Clown College, yes.
Oh,
who was the other one?
It has Michael DeGo.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, about a couple years ago, he was at TAM, and I grabbed some time with him. We had a talk for about 20, 30 minutes. Yeah,
well, I've talked to Godot for 20, 30 years, so he's a good person to talk to.
And is that Clown College where you met Teller?
No. I met neither of them at Clown College. I met Teller. I was still in high school, and Teller was a high school teacher at a different school. Teller was a classics teacher at high school Latin and Greek. He was actually teaching at the school that Jon Stewart was going to outside of Trenton, Lawrence Township in New Jersey. And I was up in high school in Massachusetts, and Teller and I met through a guy who was doing weird music shows at Amherst College in Massachusetts. He had an organization called the Otmar Sheffer Memorial Society for the Preservation of Unusual and Disgusting Music, and I was juggling in that, and Teller was selling pencils, pretending to be blind, and reciting poetry that he'd written in Latin. And we got to know each other and then developed from there. And Godot I met because we were both jugglers. And when I started coming to Vegas and playing here, he was one of the people, along with Lance Burton, that I'd hang out with, and we got very close then. So neither of them tied in with Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey, greatest show on earth. But yes, Godot went there. I think a couple years after me, I believe. I believe when I went, I was the youngest person there. I believe it was way back. I was 17. Way back in 73, and I think Godot went in 75.
Ah. So what led to the Asparagus Valley Culture Society?
Well, the guy I mentioned who started the Otmar Sheffer Memorial Society, Weir Christopher, it was the three of us, and Weir did classical music, and Teller and I did magic and juggling. And we wanted to put together a slightly different variety show. And we did that, and we were pretty successful. We played Philadelphia for a couple of years, and then played for 3 years, 965 shows in San Francisco in a little theater, which is now, I believe, a Thai restaurant right down the street from all the strip joints. And it was right across the street from the Mabuhay Gardens, where a lot of the punks started. So in 79, 80, I would be doing shows in San Francisco and then running across the street and seeing, the dead Kennedys and Eye Protection and, Pearl Harbor and the Explosions and all these late 70s, early 80s hardcore bands. And it was a great time. And then the third member of the group, the whole group split up, and then Teller and I got together and started Penn and Teller. And then we closed Asparagus Valley in 81, Halloween of 81, and then lived in Southern California for a while. And then by 85, we were off Broadway in New York, just the two of us.
Now, it's been said many times it was James Randi that put you and Teller together. Is that true?
Well, yeah, philosophically, yes. Teller and I knew each other, but and we had talked a lot about magic. And, Jerry Seinfeld says that all magic is, here's a quarter, now it's gone, you're an asshole, now it's back, you're an idiot, show's over. And we wanted to do something different. We wanted to do magic that respected the audience in some way, or in every way. And I was also so disillusioned. When I was in junior high, I got this ESP set from Kreskin, just this piece of shit ripoff. And I'd seen him doing what he called science on a television show, and believed it, believed that there was a science in ESP, and, bought this horrible little set and then made my family run through all these little tests with me and so on. And I was, going to the library often and reading up on variety arts and juggling and magic. And I happened to open a Dunninger book and saw the description of the trick that he had presented as a scientific experiment. And I was heartbroken and flew into a rage about psychics, but also about scientists. I just couldn't believe that scientists would lie to me. And I also hated magicians. I met Teller, we talked about that, but then I saw Randi. And Randi was there on stage talking, and his point, the most important point to me, was that you could do magic and you could lie. If you did within a proscenium, you could use that lie to tell the greater truth and not really rip people off. It was a very important moment to me and to Teller. And so Teller and I went backstage, and I remember one of the first moments I felt like I was an insider instead of an outsider was Randi was backstage talking to it was a college he was doing, I guess, and he had a prediction or a reading he was doing from a guy who had an envelope in his pocket, the dean or something, had the envelope with him. And Randi had to make very clear that that guy had held that envelope the whole time, he'd never seen it. And while Randi was talking, I just met him. I just met Randi. And while Randi was talking with the dean and me and Teller backstage, Randi said, Penn, did you know that Houdini had dyslexia? And I said, no. And he said, well, yeah, he used to switch things. And right on the word switch, he did the envelope switch in his hand, right in front of the dean, right in front of all these people, and said the word switch and did the switch. And I saw it and was just so thrilled that I was part of it. And that conversation with Randi turned into more conversations with me and Teller, and we started working together. So out of Randi, I mean, there's no way I can imagine a Penn and Teller without Randi before us. And there's no way I can really imagine me as I am now without Randi. I mean, he was such an important influence. And in every interview I do, in every bit that I do, you hear things that I learned from Randi when I was 17 and things I learned from Randi when I was 55. Randi has been a mentor, a teacher, a hero, and a friend for my entire adult life. He's the most important person to me outside of my family.
And, you mentioned something in there about you making sure that you do magic that's not trying to actually make people believe you do these things as supernatural. If anybody's ever seen your stage show especially, they would know that you try to live up to that.
I sure do. My rule, and it's a fairly hard rule to follow, but I do try to follow it, is sawing a woman in half.
Yeah.
Everybody watches a sawing a woman in half, and no matter how real it looks, nobody, except someone who is seriously, mentally ill, but you can really say nobody leaves that theater thinking that that woman was injured in any way, shape, or form. And that is the rule that I try to use for every magic trick. Now, it gets very difficult when you're dealing with mentalism. Even your best mentalists will fall back on things they know aren't true. They'll say stuff like, I'm using psychological cueing, or weasel words like, I'm using my five senses to create the illusion of a sixth, or you could do this if you study. And there's all this weasel stuff that people do. They're terrified of telling the truth in mentalism. And it's very difficult, but I think Teller and I have managed to do some pretty amazing mentalism tricks while making people very aware that this does not in any way change their view of the universe, that we don't have any powers that they don't have. And the most important thing, and the thing that mentalists are always so careful to avoid, and we lean into, is the word trick. Magicians and mentalists try to avoid that word, and it's a glorious word. It's a terrific word. It's an honest word. We are doing a trick. And all the guys that say illusion and all the people that say experiment, it's just such incredible bullshit. We are doing tricks, and we're proud of it. And as Teller points out, not only is it important morally, but also it's important to your ego. If there's a power that you're just demonstrating, you don't get the credit. If you've learned a really cool trick, it's us doing it. We want the credit. We do wicked good tricks. That's what we do.
It's like trying to make people believe that you have some special thing when you're doing a trick. to me, it's the same as a football player using God for the reason why he's so good.
Yeah, but I've also been told that football player is doing less well now, which maybe means God is fading away.
Given that, nasty thing called aging that we all have.
Yeah, well, I think it's really funny that if you're going to give credit to God, you must give the blame. You must. You cannot have a one-way street. So when you thank God for winning, I hope you blame God when you lose. At least it'd be funnier.
So, everybody knows you for things like your magic and your stage show, and your recent TV show was Bullshit. Bullshit, did you guys decide to stop that show, do other things?
Yes, I mean, that is essentially what happened. We were the longest-running show on Showtime. It's a little more complicated than that. The details are probably uninteresting, but we tried very hard to keep Bullshit on and do shows on other networks, and it just got to be impossible. But I'm very happy to say, and this is not in any way official and may not come to pass, we've just turned a pilot in to Showtime for a new show that I hope takes the next step on Bullshit. And Showtime, the first reports are that they absolutely love it. So there may be another Penn and Teller Showtime show very similar to Bullshit, very skeptical and very political and theological and skeptical coming up in 2013. I certainly hope so.
Would it be anything like the show you guys did in the UK? Was it Fool Us?
No, we're not thinking about doing. We are thinking about doing a deal on Fool Us for America, but that's not that show. This is a real skeptical, direct show like Bullshit, and not a magic show like Fool Us. Oh, cool! Very cool.
So, you also, for a little while between 2006 and 2007, you had that TV show Identity.
Yes, I did. Very briefly, that I love doing, and I'm also talking about doing other game shows. We'll see how that goes as well.
And in the 90s, when the internet hit, people might not realize that you had regular columns at places like Excite.com and places like that.
Yeah, I was a big, I've had an email address since 1984.
Yeah.
And I've been I'm a real proponent of technology. I guess everybody is, but I loved it. I'm an early adopter. And I was making predictions about how the web would change our life. And I was, I was very, very grandiose and made overstatements that I couldn't back up. And it turns out that I came in under it. I mean, we're doing, the internet is changing our world much more than even I thought. I mean, it's now pretty clearly bigger in terms of changes than the Gutenberg press, and it's just wonderful.
That's the digital version of the same thing.
Yeah, except more important and more accessible. Yeah. And it's changing everything instantly. Not the least of which is pornography.
I think that was the first thing they had on the internet, because I've been there since the very beginning in the 80s, like you. I had an email address. So I think that's one of the first things I remember seeing that was actually a picture.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the word is that the second thing printed on the Gutenberg press was pornography. I mean, it's just, if you have a technology and you can't use it for sex, that technology is not going to be very successful.
Is that one of the reasons why you invented the Jillette?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very proud of having a patent on a female masturbation device. It certainly shows that I have my priorities in the right place.
Well, magic, tricking people, and some forms of modern vibrators.
I get that happening. If you go to the, people always think I'm kidding. If you go to the U.S. Patent Office and you search for Jillette, Jillette, you will see my patent.
I actually double-checked it before I did this interview just to make sure it was real. You've now been involved with new media for a little while. You had a thing with Crackle for a little while.
Yep, and then I had a thing with Sony. Yeah. And now we're doing on Adam Carolla's network with Godot, which you said has been on your show. Yeah. We do a show called Penn Sunday School every Sunday at PennSundaySchool.com. And we have it live for the congregation with video at noon on every Sunday, and then it goes to Podcast World with Stitcher and iTunes and all of that.
What I think that most people would find really interesting is where you got the theme music for your Penn Sunday School from. Yeah,
it's my favorite hymn. When I was back when I was a child and I was a Christian, it's This Is My Father's World, which is always my favorite hymn to sing in church. And when I wanted to do Penn Sunday School, I said, well, I should really start with a hymn. And so I rewrote the words, which was not much. I just changed This Is My Father's World to This Is Penn Sunday School, and then got my band, the No God Band, that plays at CAM every year. And we recorded it, put a little searing guitar on it, and it's a theme song. I love doing it.
So I actually have you on because you have a brand new book that came out, a couple days ago? I think at the time.
Yeah, it came out a few days ago.
Yeah.
It's called Every Day is an Atheist Holiday, and more magical tales. And it's, I think it's pretty good. I mean, it's gotten, God knows, got a lot of good reviews. This is getting even better ones, and it's selling even better. So, yeah, pick it up. Check it out. Every Day is an Atheist Holiday.
Yeah, and you've actually been quoted in saying that you go beyond atheism. What does that actually mean?
Well, I was on Joy Behar's show, and I said that I was a hardcore atheist. And she said, what do you mean hardcore atheist? And I said, I don't really believe other people believe. I'm always amazed at that you hear people who claim to be Catholics and then have premarital sex. And you say, if I thought there was heaven and hell, I wouldn't screw up ever. How could you possibly sin when you think the stakes are that high? So I think everybody has a little bit of doubt in them, even those that are most religious. And we're seeing that happen very quickly as people are admitting to atheism, or at least non-religion, very, very quickly. I mean, the numbers are growing at unbelievable speed.
Well, it's funny. I always tell people all the time, is like, if you really believe things, why would you even wear a seatbelt?
Exactly. Every time you stop at a stop sign, you're negating God.
I know.
If those, there are no atheists in foxholes, there are only atheists in foxholes. If you really believe God controlled every little sparrow fall, you just stand up and walk across the battlefield and let God take care of you. There is nothing but atheists in foxholes.
I think the only time I've ever seen that happen was in the beginning of Dances with Wolves.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's essentially the story of F Troop.
Yeah, exactly. You've actually written quite a few books, and it wasn't until the last couple that you actually focused on the atheism part.
Yeah, it's always been mentioned. It's always been a presence there, but it's never been the subject. The live Penn and Teller show, we don't even mention it. We're doing a magic show and doing it live. That's what it's about. But the past, I guess, like many, many atheists, 9/11 was a turning point. I just said, every time I condone faith, every time I don't say there's no God, I'm contributing to this. And we have to really say that faith is out of hand and faith is the enemy. And we just have to, when people say they believe something because they believe it for no other reason, we must question that. We must do that because it's life that's in the balance.
So what have your thoughts been about that odd culmination of events that seems to be happening with the skeptics movement, and we have this weird back and forth between the skeptics and the atheists, and a lot of that came at TAM this year?
Yeah, I don't know. I was one of the ones from the beginning of TAM. The very first one was saying that I believed it was tied in with atheism. And I was one of the ones that pushed Randi hard to add atheism to the agenda. But I know that they go back and forth on that. And I guess I can understand the arguments that skepticism and atheism are different, but they aren't to me. I certainly entertain those arguments and respect them. But to me, skepticism bleeds into atheism, and atheism bleeds into skepticism. But I do understand that's not true for everyone.
Not everybody, but I think it's in an overall general sense. I think that's where I think the definition gets a little weird.
Yeah, it does. They have to do some pretty careful definitions to separate skepticism from atheism. But I think you can do it. It's just hard work.
Then I've been to a few of the atheist-only meetings before, and I've always been shocked at how not skeptical just atheist groups alone are. It kind of surprised me because I always knew there might be a little crossover, but I didn't realize how not skeptical many atheists are.
Yeah, it's surprising when you hear, Bill Maher believes in ghosts.
Yeah.
Bill Maher is, anti-Western medicine. Bill Maher has all these beliefs, and he's certainly an atheist, but he's not a skeptic. And it's a very odd combination.
So in your new book, since I have you on, might as well take a little bit of time to talk about stuff that's in the book. Right at the beginning of the book, you talked about your views on Halloween and Christmas, which pretty much mirror mine exactly, that you believe they're both secular, and your reasons are pretty much dead on.
Well, thank you. The whole point of Every Day is an Atheist Holiday, the book, is that, holiday means holy day, and holy means exalted. And I'm afraid that sometimes people who are so worried about death and so worried about an afterlife miss this life right here as it speeds by with all its joy and its glory and its love. And, most of the atheists I know fall into that category, joyous and full of love. And the idea of a bitter atheist that turns his back on God is one that I just don't know any of them. And I think maybe an old-fashioned and probably never true image. And I try to do a big celebration of life and enjoy every moment that goes by.
Yeah, it's one of those things that made me kind of sad to see that we don't have Paul Kurtz anymore, because he was a perfect example of somebody who embraced the life we have now, but yet expanded on atheism all the time.
Yeah.
Are you and your wife going to start going to Halloween fetish parties again anytime soon?
I think we should. The question is never desire. The question is always time. And that's on everything, just trying to find time. This year, during Halloween, I was doing Celebrity Apprentice All-Stars, so there was no time for the fetish party. I was pretty much sequestered. But one of these days, we'll get back, you bet.
And you also put a chapter in this book dedicated to something you say all the time, is a quote, "The purpose of art is to stand naked on the stage." Had you ever found the actual official quote and who actually said it?
Yes, it's Allen Ginsberg, and the quote is, "The poet stands naked before the world. The poet stands naked before the world." And I probably read that when I was 15, and somehow conflated it with Winnie Bruce and changed the wording and everything else. But I finally found it in San Francisco at the Beat Museum, and I was looking around, and there was a picture of Allen Ginsberg and Gregory Corso naked. And there beside them was the quote, and I was thrilled to pieces. And of course, took my clothes off right there, dropped my pants, and stood naked with Allen Ginsberg and Gregory Corso.
And then you did it again on a radio show.
I sure do. I have no problem getting naked. I think if you're in show business, you should be naked once in a while.
You got to be a really good friend with Gilbert Gottfried to talk to him about slapping him and flying across the country, because you're pretty much an anti-violence guy.
I am. But it was a funny conversation. Gilbert is the funniest person alive, and I'm very proud to call him a friend. And I just wanted one conversation in the book that is so indicative of all our conversations. He just makes me roll around laughing all the time.
Yeah. So I will let you go, but thank you so much for doing the show.
Pleasure talking to you.
No
man.
problem.
Okay, bye-bye.
Like Skepticality? You can help out the show by writing a good review for the show on iTunes, or by going to our website, clearing your browser cookies, and clicking on the Amazon link at the top of our homepage. Every little bit helps keep the show coming to you free on a regular basis.
As always, I have to give lots of thanks to Penn for taking the time to discuss some of his life and a bit about his new book, as he was quite busy with media interviews and had a very hectic schedule during the time I got to talk to him. Also, thank to Bob Carroll, Wendy, Jarrett, Eve, Bob Blakewitz, and Heather for their segments, and I hope all listeners enjoyed the new content as much as I did. Make sure you go to the website and check out the links and information, which are all contained in the show notes for this episode at our website, skepticality.com.
This has been Skepticality, the official audio program of Skeptic Magazine. Send us feedback via email at hosts@skepticality.com or give us a call toll-free at 1-866-800-2121. Thanks for listening.